Hi, I'm Shan Wu with a Under Color of Law hot take on Trump's spiritual advisor, Robert Morris. So apologize for my appearance, just got back from a trip, but this story really jumped out at me and I wanted to talk to you all about it. So this is Robert Morris. He, until recently, was the pastor at a megachurch, the Gateway Church in Dallas, Texas. He founded that church with his wife in 2020. Now, he's not just any rando megachurch founder, but he's a pastor that Trump once named as his spiritual advisor. And Trump named Morris to his Evangelical advisory board back around the 2016 election, which included Jerry Falwell Jr., president of Liberty University. Also former, I should say, president of Liberty University, because Falwell resigned after a sex scandal involving himself, his wife, and a pool attendant who went into business with them that was documented in the Hulu documentary called God Forbid. But I digress. So Morris had been a very important player in the Trump advisory board. And in 2020, Trump really put Morris and his megachurch on the map when Trump attended a conference there. And Ben Carson was also there as well. You can see Ben Carson standing there talking. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Carson's recent support of Trump at a, quote, black church in Detroit, at which the attendees were mostly all white. But the Morris Church has experienced really amazing growth. Since they opened in 2000, first they opened a 64,000 square foot facility with a 600-seat auditorium after only being open for 3 years. 5 years later, they added another campus. Today, there's been a weekly attendance somewhere around 100,000 people generally attend those services. So take a quick listen to Morris doing his pitch.
This too. I think sometimes we actually tell Satan what's a trump in our life. In other words, I've actually heard people say something like, you know, if that ever happened to me, I don't think I could keep serving God. I've heard people say, you know, if my husband did this, that would be the end of our marriage. Okay, why would you say that? Because do you understand what your enemy does then? Your enemy says, thank you. Because, you know, I was working on your husband in like 5 different areas. But now I know all I have to do is work on him in that one area. So don't give Satan any trump cards. You have to know that if he has a trump card, it's because you gave it to him, because Jesus took away the whole deck 2,000 years ago. I mean, he took away all of Satan's power unless we open a door to him, unless we give him some, yield in an area.
Now, it's kind of ironic, him talking about the Trump card there, so it chose that clip. But you remember, I said he only ran that church until recently. Why? Because just a few days ago, a young woman named Cindy Clem Shire told a religious watchdog blog that in 1982, Morris, who was then a 20-year-old traveling pastor, came to stay with her and her family. And on Christmas, he began to engage in sexual activity with her. He began to molest her. And in very classic pedophile fashion, he told her not to tell anyone, or it would, quote, ruin everything. Now, Morris has admitted that this happened. He made a statement to the Christian Post that he made the statement after she came forward, he acknowledged the claims in a statement saying that he had engaged in what he called, quote, inappropriate sexual behavior with a, quote, young lady, refusing to acknowledge Clemshire's age at that time. And what he told them was, quote, it was kissing and petting and not intercourse, but it was wrong, he said. And he also claimed that with the blessing of the girl's father and church elders, he returned to the ministry. He took a little break after this abuse had been reported. And according to him, he asked their forgiveness and they forgave him. And the elders of the church have since backed him up, saying that he had disclosed a, quote, moral failure and had since been absolved. And thus far, no criminal charges. Said the church, Pastor Robert, this is a quote, has been open and forthright about a moral failure he had over 35 years ago when he was in his 20s and prior to him starting Gateway Church. He has shared publicly from the pulpit the proper biblical steps he took in his lengthy restoration process. That's what they said. according to the statement. Here's what they didn't say, and here's what Morris didn't say. Cindy Clemshire was 12 years old when Morris abused her, and that abuse continued on for many years. So a little bit of bias here. I used to prosecute sex crimes, including crimes against children. As many of you probably know, it's a strict liability standard. There aren't any mitigating circumstances when the victim is a child. Why is that? Because simply by legal definition, children cannot consent to any kind of sexual activity, just as they can't enter into contracts or drive cars. They're just not allowed to do that. They can't form that kind of consent because the power dynamic is completely non-equal there. So that's the policy reason why it's what's called a strict liability charge. There's no defense to it. So in the whistleblower blog that first disclosed this case, there's a great example of why that's the law, which is there's the suggestion that the church elders blamed her for being flirtatious. She was wearing pink pajamas at the time. That's a very common thing we'd actually hear when trying some of the sexual abuse cases, that they being defense counsel, and sometimes the defendants would actually testify in those cases under some weird idea that they could convince the jury that the child was somehow to blame for this. That oftentimes you hear this defense of, oh, she looked a lot older than she was. That's simply not a defense when you're talking about sex with an underage minor, is a child. Now, one question is, when the church learned of this, to me, the question screams out, why didn't they report it? I mean, why aren't churches mandatory reporters? Why aren't they required to report sexual abuse when they've learned of it being done by their own clergy people? Now, in Texas, for certain kinds of sexual abuse of children, there's not a statute of limitations period for a criminal law. The Gateway Church now claims they didn't know it was a child versus a, quote, young woman. But now they do. Now the police know. Now the DA knows. Now the Texas AG knows. The abuse happened in Texas, where the church is, as well as in Oklahoma. That crosses interstate lines. Hello, DOJ. Perhaps Merrick Garland's DOJ will do a better job of investigating this than they have done with the allegations of Representative Matt Gaetz having sex with a minor. Now, I don't know what the, quote, biblical steps that were taken were for this pastor's restoration, but I know they certainly didn't include criminal justice steps. And also, I know that absolved is not resolved. The only resolution that can come here for the criminal justice system has to involve a criminal investigation and indictment. A lot of times in cases like this, where there's smoke, there's fire. There's going to be other victims of this that oftentimes come forward once there's more publicity about what has happened. That's one of the important aspects of making this kind of thing public. That's why someone like Ms. Shire is such a hero for coming forward with this after all this time, having to carry all that pain and trauma all these decades. Because when she comes forward, other people may hear about it, they may feel empowered and feel like, hey, maybe someone will believe me now. But this kind of crime, alleged crime, that happens when the perpetrator is such a rich and powerful person, protected not only by their wealth and their power, but also here by their institutions. A lot of time institutions hide these things, whether it's universities, Congress, or in this case, the church. That's why we need to pierce that kind of veil. That's why people need to demand investigations. That's the purpose of criminal investigations. So this cries out for a full criminal investigation. And gee, maybe candidate Trump might want to make a statement decrying sexual abuse against women and sexual abuse of children. But no, I don't think so. He's more likely to come out defending Morris as being the victim of a witch hunt. So that's it for now. I'm Shan Wu. Thanks for watching. And again, really enjoy having the comments and the replies, and really appreciate knowing what kinds of topics you want to hear about. So talk to you soon.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.